Coming off of Praise the Void and in context to the entirety of Exile, I'm very curious to see where this track goes in pacing. It's a bit of a waverance if you look at the overall construction of this album. Tracks float around in regards to their specific tone of genre, like all over the place. But Exile has been very satisfying in that respect. It definitely feels like we're touching on every baseline that Demon Hunter is adept in regard to creating their music. And as I've stated before previously, I started covering Exile in the beginning, like months ago, and I promised for a while a completion of that entire album with you. I don't tend to do full-length album reactions that often. I seldom do it, but in the context of Demon Hunter, I love the singles, and having been a fan of the group for 12 years of their 20-year tenure, I figured it was deserved. Again, they're an established name for me, so in terms of my playlist, they've been around for many years. So going through not Revolutions, that's what we're about to look at today, but through Exile with you, I figured it'd be a real treat, and it's certainly shaped up thus far in the 10 tracks of total of what I've covered thus far to be just that. Even though, like I said, in terms of the overall duration of this album, there are tracks and tone that are shifting all over the place. So I'm curious to see perhaps where Revolutions goes. I sense by the energy of the piece, having read the lyrics in advance and the interpretation behind it, that it's going to be more of an aggressive song. I don't know. At the very least, it isn't commentary. It's much more assertive. But it's going to be very interesting. Again, like I've said also in context of this album, my familiarity over 12 years does give me a sense of understanding on where Demon Hunter has gone in previous releases, and this album is very different, and perhaps some tracks that come across as a little more experimental, let's say for example Master and Godless specifically, even Heaven Don't Cry too, but even just the presence to it and the added conception of speaking in regards to conception as well, this is the first ever conceptual album they've ever done, but the idea of marrying this to where we are in a timely sense. I mean, Demon Hunter's always had that realistic baseline to them, especially having read a lot of their interpretations in the last couple of months of what I wasn't necessarily exposed to when I first listened to a lot of their work. Because as I've said it as well previously, and in terms of me covering this album, when I say covering the entire album, I mean in context, I mentioned this again, like I said in the past, the Exile Deluxe Edition. I'm speaking about the entirety plus the 2 bonus tracks that came as a part of the Deluxe kit. And on recommendation from me, again, as somebody who's been a 12-year fan, that is the way to enjoy their work. So if you do choose to look at Exile at a deeper level and you want to experience that deeper reverence of what I've gotten with Demon Hunter, and perhaps enjoy some, specificity in regard to this release. Again, like I said, conceptual vision. Get the Deluxe Edition. I highly recommend it. It is just a recommendation from me. I don't know if I need to clarify that for YouTube's sake. It's not a sponsorship. It's a recommendation. Having been exposed so far to what I have on Exile, it is the preferred way to enjoy it. And you'll get a comic book to boot. 1 of 4, I believe. That's the first ever. It's my first ever comic book, in fact, that I've ever owned. Demon Hunter has that acclaim, and they always will. Anywho, I'm going to go ahead and go through Revolutions. We're going to experience this track together for a first listen. I'm always game for more music, in regards, especially to Demon Hunter, again, having been a long-time fan. If you're not familiar, they're real staples in the Christian metal scene. They've been for many years. Even though, again, like I said, they got plenty of secular fans across the board as well, from what I understand. Wide reach, and their talent certainly speaks to that. But I'm excited to continue my run-through of Revolutions and perhaps showcase more talented music, which is something that, as I've said for many years, I've wanted to do on this channel, and as of the past year, I guess now, evolving into 2023, I've materialized that ambition much more grandly, like I've wanted to for a long time. And with Demon Hunter, it's been a real treat thus far of Exile. So let's continue our journey through with Revolutions. I'm going to go ahead and cue up the song. We don't have a visualizer at this point. I'm just going to pull up, maybe it's a small visualizer for you. So forgive me if you see me throughout the song. I am listening to it, but I might be looking down. I'm looking at the booklet because, again, like I said, if you want that deeper experience of Exile, I recommend getting the Deluxe kit. It's only $40 because you get this booklet. If you want to enjoy the heart of the artist and the songs, through several entries, in fact, for really every one of their pieces on this album, the lyrics are provided to you as well as these little bio sections. I mean, for some songs it differs, but let's say, for example, with Chemicals, that's the next track we're going to get to in a different video, but you get these little inserts about the track specifically, and then you get these little bios. This is the first for them about the idea behind the music of the piece. They've never done that before in their booklets, but it is the way to enjoy them. So if I am looking down, forgive me, I am reading the lyrics for myself, and those will be available to you as well if you're not familiar for how I format my music-related coverage. I have the lyrics provided for you in the video, and they'll go along with the piece as we proceed through it. Okay, Revolutions. Very interesting commentary, by the way, I guess, and to give you a bit of a baseline as we judge, and we'll talk about this more when we end the track in terms of our coverage here, but this is it's a song that's offering a commentary. Again, it feels very realistic and relevant to where we are today about protests. Interesting. I'm thinking again it's going to go along more of the lines of an aggressive energy because of that attribution. And focus. It's a long song too, at nearly a little over 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, going back. Oh. Good structure. I didn't expect this key change. I thought with, again, that introduction and transition from Praise the Void, the previous work, it was going to go in one direction. They totally changed that. Good scope, great energy. It's nice to get back in that aggressive edge. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, okay. Real mixture of tone. Interesting. Great riffs, but again, the way that this is methodically planned out. Oh, it's fascinating to blend that with the lyrics and the interpretation. Oh. This is really interesting. Again, like I said, a really experimental energy to their work on this album. This is a bit, like, starkly different from the structure of other tracks they've done previously. Wide mixture here. A lot of elements of what they're known for and established in. I really like that transition in terms of the higher pitched voice again of what Ryan can do. He's so equipped. Into these screamo verses, it's great. I have to admit it's a bit softer than I thought, but I think the sentimental construction to it, at least in some part of the lyrics, is a good blend with the heart of the artist here with the song and what he's commentating on. I think it's fitting. This is really interesting. Again, a bit disruptive in materialization to what I originally pictured for the piece. But it makes sense. There are a couple tracks on this album that, again, it's not oftentimes I see a good blend in between tone of music and lyrical inspiration, but there's a couple tracks that satisfy this. This is not just the first, another place was like this too. That was track 7. But these particular verses here with the screamo, that's satisfying to me, is that's their bass line. That's how they originally came to me, was through that screaming edge, and Ryan Clark really is so talented. This song definitely feels like a cry for change. It's funny. It's its own. The song is about protests, and it's kind of about a protest in itself to our established norms as of late. Especially as it pertains to the protest scene. and perhaps the motives, or really participation in itself. Interesting conclusion and opening. It works though, I think. I mean, the pacing in itself is fabulous. But its involvement in the pacing context deeply transformative work. Wow. That is a track to take in. That is extremely complex from them. But like I said, I've made reference to in this video, there's a grounding of reality in this album I just haven't seen in other places. And perhaps, again, it helps that I'm reading this in the moment, whereas with other Demon Hunter albums, I have not had that experience. And they've been very much on listen that I've taken in the meaning of the pieces and the inspiration. I have not had that background to work off of. But having put out a lot of money, admittedly, I'm willing to do that for Demon Hunter, for the Exile Deluxe Edition, plus in the recent couple of months, the Outlive. That's, again, I should have bought this. That's my mistake. I didn't buy this in the time, and it's so hard if you want to buy this and you're a later fan like me. I picked up the last copy that was available on eBay currently. I checked as of last night. There aren't any more available, and I put out like $128 for that. Counting shipping, it's like $28 from Canada. But it was satisfying. I mean, if you could ever find yourself a full kit of a deluxe edition, I'm not selling mine. Don't start, clamoring in the comments about like, I'm not giving mine up for you. As nice as I am, nope, I'm keeping this. It's worth your purchase if you can get that ring. Again, it is worth it. Anyway, it's my favorite ring, actually. I never went for, as I said, like the big box-shaped rings. Like, it's a bit flamboyant for my taste, but at least I thought it was, at least the beginning, based on shape. But I'm quite fallen in love with it. Maybe just because of that Demon Hunter devotion. Anywho, I've also got the War and Peace one as well. Boy, this thing is heavy. These things are huge. That one especially, it's one giant booklet. But it is the way to enjoy the pieces. I don't say that to boast, by the way. Just see that as a expanded recommendation from me, as somebody who, again, is an established fan for over 12 years. If you want to have that full experience, that is the way to enjoy them. Because it does give you this insight that you can better appreciate the works. And Revolution necessitates that. I'd be curious for those of you who have heard this on standard release and you have not had the background of a track to work off of, where that's expressed in this booklet, as every track on Exiles is. What was your feeling of this for you, and if you caught on to the meaning? Because again, this is basically one giant commentary on protests. It's fascinating for me, though, speaking on the music, the opener gave me a vision of how the track would personally begin. Like, I thought it was going to be much heavier than it was, and yet the chorus sections and the verses, while having that more aggressive edge, especially in the screaming of what Demon Hunter was established in the beginning, working off of, the opening and the ending tease this much more malevolent piece and energy and powerful energy, and yet the song in itself is much more grounded, I'd say, in context to its message. It's so interesting for me, again, because I listen to piece and it's like it's trying to emphasize that heart and intentionally be a bit disruptive in expectation. It's a good subversion, in my opinion, if there is such a good thing as, subverting expectations. This is, I'd say, a positive example, because I think it does work in the track's favor in exploring that meaning. And like I said, this is a commentary on protesting in our modern age, and yet it's also a protest song in itself, again, based on protest norms of what's happened, let's say, over the past 2 years. And whereas with other tracks, and perhaps the ambition of Demon Hunter, where, let's say, for example, in the track Master, and I had to get the booklet to better understand the meaning of that piece, it's a good song in itself, but that song is very much like 2019's War and Peace's, well, it's Peace specifically, Recuse Myself, which also speaks to the same motive as Master in what's the word I'm looking for? Abstaining from involvement in the political scene. And Demon Hunter's never been like a big political group, but this album has tapped more, and I would say, a general energy of agreeable standards of normality. Amongst many like myself, we're constantly finding ourselves pushed into the more, I don't want to be involved in the political space scene. We're just kind of not of that mindset because of how toxic that landscape is. I prefer a more positive, environment in my life. Revolutions is it speaks, again, if we think back in recent history over the last couple of years, protesting has been quite active in many regards and for many social causes. And the song speaks to that relevancy And yet it's speaking about protesting itself. I love the way this is worded, by the way, and not just in respect to Demon Hair's lyrics. Ryan Clark is an excellent writer. I mean, the lyrics are always beautifully constructed, but the messages behind them are also very well written in regards to intention of thought. Like, he's a very intuitive person. That's what I read into his mindset when I read his thoughts. I'm just kind of skimming out a couple points here. Again, like I said, if you want to get the full experience, buy that booklet. Highest recommendation from me. It's still available, I believe, on their site. I hope it is. Because some people are probably going to want to pick this up again, understanding the context of his song. But, So again, it's big. Speaking again in the commentary perspective, I'll get back to maybe the protest vibe in itself. But the way he says this, pull out a couple quotes here. In today's world where outrage is widely rewarded, I tend to think of protests as a proverbial punch card for social awareness. Thank you for your contribution. You did your part. Carry on. I completely agree. I don't want it to diminish any progress that may have legitimately resulted from these types of efforts in the past, but I don't believe today's problems can be solved by protest. I would agree. It just seems, at least to me, in part, to be a whole lot of yelling and screaming, or at least that's what it devolves into. And while there are perhaps legitimate causes to get behind it, if you're so impassioned on an issue, yeah, you have that right, speaking in America, as dictated by the Bill of Rights, to peacefully assemble, right? But we've also seen, maybe in recent years, I think back, for example, of 2020, we saw amid perhaps protests that many were very enveloped in regards to passion and the substance of again, there's varying variety of social causes in consideration of protests. Some might be good, some might be, pushing bad causes. Again, I can certainly think of ones that maybe fall along the more bad line, especially of recent couple of years. But I'm thinking, let's say, for example, just to pick one out of 2020, while some of those, mindsets in regards to the mass majority of protesters were probably from a respected position of heart and passion, just looking at the world, being like, I have this grievance and I want to assemble people who I feel, could provide some power to where we want to see the world go, putting strength, I guess, in numbers, but again, peacefully assembling. We did see where some of those protests devolved into, and I'm being very careful on how I say this, it's intentionally, I don't blame the protesters in part. I blame people who perhaps co-opted it. And we saw, factors that in terms of businesses that were, we saw what happened over 2020, businesses burning, or buildings burned down, looting everywhere. It was mass chaos. And the protests themselves, I remember, I'll try to attribute this the best I can. I don't know if I can, because the clip, I saw it in passing, it was a while ago, but I do try and provide credibility to my position here as best I can. So if I can find the clip, I will bring it up. I remember this woman, in one video that I saw, she was just filming like an Instagram video or something, and she was out with her friends, or perhaps people who were allied in her cause, and protesting. This is, again, I believe, during the 2020 protests after the whole George Floyd thing, and then, with maybe other matters as well in terms of the BLM stuff, but she was out with her friends or, compatriots protesting. And from what I could see, it was a peaceful protest, and she was quite aggrieved, and I sympathized with her, because what she was saying, she turned her camera around, and she was filming these two people dressed in all black, vandalizing a storefront property. I think it was a Starbucks or something, and I don't remember if she was like maybe near tears, but she was highly emotional. She was really upset. And I completely, again, agree with her, because she was like, looking at the circumstances of the political landscape and perhaps where culture was, she said, I think very aptly, they're going to blame us for this. They're going to blame us for protesting. While I've heard, perhaps I've brought that clip in attention, maybe some of my peers, maybe I disagree with it in part. I understand the assertion where maybe some people in my life have been like, well, she shouldn't have been there in the first place because she provided, with everybody else there, a gateway for that to happen. I'm like, but, she still has that right to go and protest. And I would not see that as fair. If I were outside protesting for something that I truly felt mattered to me, I wouldn't like to see people co-opting my cause for bad motives, especially since, again, keeping that in mind, who's the first person they're probably going to blame? Probably me. It wouldn't be fair at all. So I sympathize in that respect. But I look at the protest landscape, and I do wonder how effective it was. So I understand what Ryan's saying here. Because, again, I just saw the turning point. While I think the motives might be valuable, it might, again, in terms of different protests, it might differ. It depends on context. But the protest scene itself, yeah, it has a bit of a toxic perception to it because, again, of the rage that can be birthed out of that. I love the way he expresses his heart, though, in regards to his motives here. He's speaking just basically, I guess, of the rage itself and the vitriol and the anger that stems off of the protest experience. For what we can look at from, like, maybe outside in, if we're not necessarily directly participating. And again, I'm pulling out quotes here. Many of today's protests seem to lack the gravity of yesterday's. It's become clear, and this is speaking again to that whole social allegiance, perhaps, that the unintentional motive, a part of others, and perhaps why you're protesting, maybe a heartened issue to you, but for others, again, might have bad motives even behind that. So, where was I going? It's become clear that our problems as a society are truthfully so few that we fabricated things to be outraged about. Yeah, especially nowadays. Not maybe speaking directly, maybe what I say of 2020, but in other respects. Feigning offense, because again, the protest landscape is quite broad. Feigning offense has become something of a rite of passage. Amen. It lets everyone else know just how serious you are about your life. It's right on schedule with the utter idolization of the self. And past tracks have spoken to that. Let's say, for example, back to just the preceding track. Again, there's a good flow to this album overall, even lyrically, in terms of message. Another Place, Going Into Freedom Is Dead. That's another great example. But this track, feeding off of Praise the Void. Same message. Elevation of self over perhaps the eternal. Outrage is not just for the individual anymore, no. Watch as the vast majority of corporations clamor for your approval with all of their gushing virtue. That's right, the soap you use to wash your armpits now is a political agenda. I love how he worded that. It's such an off example, but I love it. It's very unique. And I detest that you don't agree. I'm like, the soap for washing your armpits of all examples. Anyway, I hope this isn't news to anyone, but if you're buying into the revolutionary battle cry of your favorite department store, you haven't the slightest idea of what it means to, quote, fight the power. See, like I said, this song in itself seems like a bit of a commentary on the protest scene. And while, to be clear, some protests might be of, again, legitimate heart and passion, and perhaps protests that maybe I would agree with in part, or maybe that I can empathize with, even if maybe necessarily I don't agree with the issue at hand, I can certainly empathize with the human experience and the emotions behind it. The protest scene in itself has become quite toxic. And what's happening today in regards to social causes, from what I've seen, again, some might be great. It's based around context and the type of issue that's being advocated for or railed against. Some issues might be worth championing, others not so much. But with the protest scene, perhaps comes again this, and I think what he's speaking to, because this album in part also is governed by a commentary on social media. That's something that Ryan Clark has expressed grievances over in the past of his works as well. I think that's probably what he's speaking to in respect to fabricated causes. Like a lot of these social media trends you might see on TikTok or Twitter that tend to gather attention are not really worth feeding, and might be in part birthing toxicity into our culture and our world, that the protest scene itself really just has become quite irrelevant. And the social causes themselves, like the companies you're advocating for, do they really have your best interests at heart? I would say no. I'm not a big fan of mass corporations as it exists, in particular because of what we've seen done in the world over the last couple of years, especially as it pertains to our cultural norms and morals. You could say, for a great example, Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood has just destroyed the world in many respects, especially in America. Just in terms of future generations, we're a dying species, I guess, in part. But in other corporations as well, like Hollywood's not the only one. There are many others under it. What are the causes you're advocating for? And this impassioned energy, right, is it feeding something noble, or is it just an exhaust of breath where otherwise that time would be much more valuable to you in other respects? It's a commentary that I can get behind. And again, the construction of a track as well, there are a couple examples with some work that I've come across where, and it's not often I see this, where the tone of a song best marries to the lyrical interpretation, in fact, emboldens it. I do feel that the dodge that the introduction and conclusion are in regard to expectations, while I thought it was going to be a much heavier song than it actually is, I feel that the softer tone with that aggressive background of what Demon Hunters established for themselves in principal focus does embolden the heart of the song. I think it's actually quite a good piece, to be honest with you. I really respect it. And as a subvertive material, I think it's an all-around really good song. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it down below. Again, really, like many tracks on this album, a bit of an oddity and expectation from what I'm familiar with them. But it is, I think, a very dynamic work. as Exiles in general has spoken to. I would love to hear your thoughts down below, though, on the piece, whether you are a long-time listener. And maybe, if you haven't purchased the deluxe edition, that background helped. Again, if you want to experience a background for yourself generally on the entire album, maybe the tracks I didn't have access to the heart of the artist, buy the book. Again, highest recommendation on that front. And of course, I'm sure for those of you who are long-time Demon Hunter fans who have also picked up the deluxe edition, you can also back me up on that. But for those of you who are coming to this as a first introduction, I'd love to hear what you think about Demon Hunter generally, as well as the song in specific focus. And if you feel so inclined, go consult the other works that they've done in the past. You will thank me. They're a really great band if you've never entertained them. As I said, if you feel so inclined to disclose your perspective, I would love to hear that contributed down below and what your thoughts are overall. The piece, again, like I said, is quite good. It's fascinating in regard, again, the complexity of the work. But I think, again, like I said, in terms of Exile, it's a never dynamic testament to how good this album is. And going forward, I'm sure the other tracks will also exude that same type of energy. Next is Chemicals. And as I've said and promised earlier on, I will make my way through the entirety of the album, including the 2 deluxe edition tracks. I'm getting to those pretty quickly, actually, because we're almost nearing the end of the album. But Chemicals is next. I'm sure it'll be a treat to listen to just as much as Revolutions, and all the past tracks I've listened to at this point have been. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.